So everyone wants to know, what is the best class? Give me a tier list, actually weigh it out for me. What class is actually going to be the best bang in terms of value received when I pick it. So we're going to go ahead and give you a PvE tier list here from myself. Now, many of you have actually seen this list, and this is part of the Aftershock United group, as well as some other input from top rank 1 players in the beta for PvP. Now, I'm going to give you a PvE tier list. I'm going to make it more visual for you. Just do the standard visual SABC tier list. If you want to check out this one, which we all put our input in, I'll go ahead and leave the Aftershock United Discord in the description so you can check this one out, or you can pause the video. But we're going to go over the overall list for PvE on this video. Let's jump into it. So we have our standard S, A, B, C, and D tiers here. Now, I generally prefer the ranking per each game mode. However, we have not actually gotten access to the beta. We've not actually done the dungeons and all that stuff, so we can't really give you a super accurate estimate on every single dungeon yet. Now, we will be updating it over the next coming weeks when we actually get into each of these boss fights and start playing them ourselves. So be sure to stay tuned for that. But I thought it'd be more fun just to go ahead and give an overall opinion. I know a lot of you out there actually like these visual lists here, so we're going to go ahead and do one for you on this video. When we're talking about PvE, which this is based on, we're talking about how fast can you clear? Are you going to be beneficial in a group? And if so, how crucial are you? Solo play does have a factor here, but I weighted a little bit less because generally group play is going to be the best thing to do in terms of speed, as well as you're just going to need a group for certain content. So if you need a group and it's going to be the most efficient or the meta way, then obviously we're going to want to favor those portions of the game. Leveling is a very minor part of the game, in my opinion. Going from 1 to 60, even going through 500 Paragon levels is very, very kind of doesn't really matter, because once you get to the first 100 Paragon levels, that's what you're going to be using in terms of your Paragon tree. Now, obviously, the levels do matter, but I think that it's not as important as getting the gear and all that stuff. So really, we're focusing on dungeons, we're focusing on Elder Rifts, making sure we can do those quickly. All the different things that we're talking about is generally going to be focused towards the end game content and what I've seen through beta footage and things like that. So first off, we're going to start off with the Barbarian, and I'm going to be dropping them in the S tier here. I will say that I'm not going to put anything in the C or D tier because I don't believe that any class is actually below average or just terrible, considering B would be the average for me. So Barbarian is in the S tier for a couple of reasons. One, when we're talking about group play, we actually have a ton of legendary items that can modify their builds, and this does play a huge part in determining the ranks here. A lot of people don't know about the legendary items, but for example, Barbarian actually has a skill called Demoralize that you can basically adjust with the legendary items to make it so that you get a giant party damage boost, which is absolutely insane. You could also make sure that you modify your sprint skill to make sure that it's AoE speed buff. So it's absolutely one of the best classes in terms of being put into a group. We're definitely going to want to have a Barbarian, make sure we're going speeding through, amping up our damage, as well as just an absolutely amazing AoE damage clearer in terms of the Barbarian with the channeling whirlwind spin to win skill. Those are all super impactful. They are lacking a little bit of single target damage, but because we're playing in a group, that's no issue. They're there to boost up your damage dealers as well as your speed of the dungeon clearing, and then clear out the trash mobs and then do some incidental damage. So the Barbarian, although it has a weakness in a little bit low in terms of single target damage, it doesn't matter because oftentimes the Demon Hunter, which we'll go over later, will make up for that. So we're going to jump into the Crusader next, and the Crusader also ends up in the S tier for me. I think that the Crusader is absolutely absurd in terms of PvE content when we're talking about group buffs. There's really two things. One, we have the Holy Banner, which I'm sure many of you have heard me talk about, but there's also a legendary item here that can modify it to where it actually centers on yourself, so you can walk around with it. And let's say you have a double Demon Hunter or just one Demon Hunter, and they're not going to be in the fray. You can actually walk over to them, or maybe walk in between your melee and your ranged classes, make sure everyone's benefiting from the 100% crit. There's also the the skill that gives you invincibility for 3, or damage immunity for 3 seconds. You could modify that with legendary items to give every single one of your party members, or in an AoE, a shield that actually burns people around them. which is absolutely massive in terms of AoE damage clearing. You can also modify a lot of your skills for AoE damage clearing as well. And it has a decent amount of single target damage while also being quite tanky in terms of the spinning shield and just the extra block chance and overall massive bonuses you get to your just defensive stats in general. So the Crusader is an excellent addition. These two classes, in my opinion, as well as one other, which we'll go over in just a moment, are absolute must-haves in your group of 4. You do want these classes, absolutely. So what is the third class we're going to be putting in there? That is going to be the Demon Hunter, which is the first 3 classes that we have to go through. These 3 classes, in my opinion, are absolute S tier here. Demon Hunter is just your go-to class. It's going to be better than any other class in terms of single target damage. And as I've already mentioned, the Crusader, the Barbarian, has a lot of incidental AoE damage. The Demon Hunter actually has a ton of AoE damage in multi-shot as well. But overall, the biggest things, as I mentioned, when we're talking about PvE content is speed. We're talking about clearing through those dungeons later on. And guess what? Demon Hunter is going to help you clear through those things as quick as you possibly can. Honestly, I personally believe that the optimal group party composition is going to be Crusader, Barbarian, double Demon Hunter. I think that run double Demon Hunter, you're going to have enough support and speed with the Barbarian and the Crusader. Crusader is going to allow you to scout in front, drop the banner when the boss comes. Barbarian's going to give you a speed bonus to make sure you're all running quickly, and then drop the party damage when the boss comes. Double Demon Hunter is just going to melt through everything, as well as just picking off enemies as you're running through by just shooting and running. And the multi-shots from both of them are just going to be massive clearers. I genuinely think that this is going to be the absolute best party composition in terms of speed. Now, you may want to slot in someone different later on because you may want some extra survivability in there. That could be absolutely possible, but I think that in terms of speed, this is absolutely a must-have, and that's really what's going to be what's going to matter for the first week of launch. When you get to the end game, I'm sure that there's going to be different compositions that you may want to run because you want to take advantage of other skills. But I think those 3 are the absolute S tiers. They're going to be the best classes that you're going to want to roll with. But that being said, I think that there's a lot of potential for these other classes down here. So next one is actually going to be the Monk, and I would say that they're actually considering in the A tier or the B tier. I'm going to go ahead and actually drop them in the B tier. And the reason for this is when we're talking about the Monk, they actually have an absurd amount of mobility as well as AoE damage. The Exploding Palm with the 7-sided strike is going to be massive AoE damage. Your basics can teleport, which is going to be great. You have dash charges, which is also great. So there's a lot of mobility, which is great for speedrunning dungeons. There's a lot of AoE, which is good for clearing trash. The only problem is when we're talking about fitting them into a group composition, what are they going to be fulfilling? Well, they're mainly going to be fulfilling their own movement speed as well as their own AoE clearing. When we're talking about running these other 3 classes, let's just assume this is the party composition we're running, right? These 4. Well, we have the AoE cleared from the Crusader, from the Barbarian, and from the Demon Hunter. So the AoE skills are kind of, you could say, not needed. They're kind of just extra, a little bit of damage. The single target damage is going to be from Demon Hunter. So what do we need? We need more single target damage. The Mystic Ally skills, by summoning the extra allies, the clones of yourself, they do a lot of single target damage, but they're not comparable. And I will say that if you compare it to these other classes here, you're just going to get more value out of that. So you don't need the AoE damage. They don't offer a ton of support in terms of speed running. They do offer a lot of survivability and a 9-second 50% damage reduction skill, which could be good and excellent for certain dungeons. I can't say for certain, but in terms of speed and in terms of running through the dungeons quickly and efficiently, I think the Monk takes a big hit there because they're really offering a ton of AoE damage and mobility for themselves, whereas the Crusader offers the scouting and the AoE damage for everyone. The Barbarian offers AoE speed for everyone and AoE damage, and the Demon Hunter is unmatched in single target damage. So each of these classes is providing something from the group that no other class actually can provide in terms of how efficiently they are doing it. So that's why I think the Monk gets a B here. Next up is the Necromancer, and I'm going to put the Necromancer in an A spot here because I do think that the Necromancer is a tier below the 3 up here, but also not quite as, I guess you could say as bad, even though I don't think the Monk is bad, as bad as the monk here. And the reason for this is really the summons. When we come down to it, the summons will provide extra entities to kind of tank some of those hits. They're actually going to do a ton of single target damage. Do not underestimate that. And one of the reasons for this is the set item that's going to be excellent for the Necromancer. There is a set item that actually gives you a ton of bonuses for your summons, and if you want to check that out, there are a ton of videos on that, as well as it's going to be on the spreadsheet for Aftershock United, so check that out as well. There's going to be a set item for the Necromancer, as well as quite a few legendary items that are going to boost the Necromancer's summons. When you're going to be running 6 skeleton warriors and things like that, and just run at the boss, you can focus them all on the boss, boost their attack speed, chunk the boss down, so they actually offer a ton of single target damage while also being kind of short to mid range, so they're not necessarily in the melee fight, which works really well for the Crusader and the Barbarian, honestly, because you're going to be able to take advantage of their buffs. So again, when I'm thinking about these classes, and outside of these 3, I'm thinking about what would it look like if this was the 4-party composition. And if you have a Necromancer, I think that you're in a good spot. They actually offer, if you need it, extra survivability in their bone armor. The summons will give the extra single target damage, and overall they're just going to provide extra entities to make sure that your Demon Hunter and your Barbarian and Crusader are staying a little bit extra safe. So I think the Necromancer is an excellent choice in terms of a 4-party composition here. Last one up is the Wizard, and in terms of PvE, actually I would put the Wizard at an A tier. So this may be a little surprising for a lot of people, because I know a lot of people consider Wizard perhaps the least popular / least the worst class in the game, so maybe you could say that they'd be at a C tier or B tier here. But I think that the Wizard, in terms of PvE, is going to offer a lot more than the Monk. And the reason for this is their damage, although not quite as good as Demon Hunter, is going to outclass the Monk's damage, as well as their teleport skill will allow them to keep up. And they actually have some solid grouping damage skills like the Black Hole. But more than that, they actually have, when you're playing in a party of 4, again, that's where I'm thinking about these classes, you're going to be able to line up your Meteor Strike with the ground damage and do combo skills, because these characters, the Crusader and the Demon Hunter, are going to be able to keep them in place. Now, the Monk does have combo skills, but you're not going to get a lot of single target damage or damage in general compared to the Wizard outside of the skills. And so when you're combining those skills together, as well as the Wizard's able to use the channeling skills and the crystal skills when the boss, which will just do massive damage. These skills are not usually available in solo play for the Wizard, and the reason for that is we're going to be having to stand still, so that may be a hit for that. But again, I think that the most important thing when we're talking about PvE is group play in late game dungeons and Elder Rifts and Challenge Rifts and things like that. So I think that the Wizard is a step up from the Monk in terms of damage potential, and that's really what you're going to want over the other classes, or over the Monk here. So that is the overall tier list for PvE, in my opinion. I do think that the Wizard inches out the Monk. It's kind of interesting because I understand why people put the Wizard below every class in the game, or even just the Monk. And the main reason for that is they compare it to the Demon Hunter, which is an absolute fair comparison, because the Demon Hunter kind of does the Wizard's role, but just way better, because we're talking about 2 classes that do pretty much only damage. They don't offer too much in terms of group skills. And the Demon Hunter just does way more damage and is also can move and shoot. Now, when we're talking about PvP, it's a different story. But in terms of PvE, there's not really an advantage in terms of the Wizard here, except for maybe the Black Hole skill and a little bit of extra AoE. But I do think that the Wizard is a little bit underestimated in PvE content. But I do think that they are a step down from the Demon Hunter, which is why you see people place it so low. And I do think the Monk is probably the worst class for PvE in terms of speed and efficiency. Now, if you're lacking in survivability, the Monk does jump up perhaps to an S tier because of their 9-second 50% damage reduction and their CC immunity and all the extra stuff that they're offering. So that is the overall tier list. Let me know what you all think. Let me know if you disagree with anything on this list. Maybe Necromancer should be A tier, or maybe Wizard should just be the B tier. I'd love to hear your, kind of thoughts in the comments down below. That being said, hopefully this helps you out in determining some of the classes for launch and getting a head start, and I will see you for the next one.